Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Jane Geller, and I support communications and engagement for this project. We're here to share information about a proposed land use redesignation application at 2500 Kings Heights Gate Southeast. Explain what the application means and answer your questions. So this session is part of the engagement process to help ensure our residents are informed and have an opportunity to ask questions as the city reviews the application. So before we begin, a few quick housekeeping notes. We will start with a short presentation to provide an overview of the application and planning process. You're welcome to submit questions at any time using the Q&A feature, which is at the bottom of your screen. We will address them following the presentation during the Q&A period. If you prefer to speak your question out loud, you can use the raise hand feature during the Q&A. However, we will answer these at the Q&A period. To help ensure we hear from as many participants as possible, we ask that questions remain brief and focused on the application. Also, this session is being recorded so we can accurately capture questions and responses and share the information with those who are unable to attend. And the recording will also be available after the session for anyone who would like to review it. Right. So tonight's agenda, this evening, we will walk through a few key topics to provide context on the application and how the process works. So we'll begin with an overview of the site and its history, followed by the planning policies that guide development in this area. We will then explain the application, including what a land use redesignation is and what is being proposed for the site. Next, we'll outline the review process and how decisions are made. Then we'll move into the Q&A period. If we're not able to get to all questions, there will be an opportunity to follow up after the session. And yeah, welcome everyone. I will pass it over to Tiffany now, the planner and project manager for this application. Take it away, Tiff.
Thanks, Jane. So before we get into the application details, I just thought I'd give a brief introduction of the groups that are here, the internal project team members. So my name is Tiffany. Jane and I are with SEMA Plus B&A Studios, and we're the planning consultants on this project. In attendance today, we also have our clients from Sand Developments Airdrie Limited. We also have two representatives from the City of Airdrie who are reviewing this application internally. And we also have in attendance to answer some questions our transportation engineer, Michael Sydenham, and the builder and architect for the later stages of the project, Ahmed Gouda. All right, so the site we're looking at today, it's 2500 Kings Gate Southeast. The project site location, as many of you will know, is between the two established neighborhoods of Kings Heights and Ravenwood in the southeast quadrant of Airdrie. Specifically, this is just south of Yankee Valley Boulevard southeast and north of Kingsland Gate southeast. So a bit of history of the site, which some of you may know. The site has been inactive and vacant for a period of time. Previously, it was owned by the municipality of Rocky View County, and it was used as a storage works yard for nearby highway maintenance. So since this time, it's been acquired by Sand Developments Airdrie Limited. This was in 2024, and the intention is to develop the site for residential uses within the Kings Heights neighborhood boundary. A bit of context. So under the city-wide planning policies, this is within the city of Airdrie, there is planning context that shapes how this site gets developed. So the first plan that we're speaking to is the Airdrie City Plan. This is Airdrie's Municipal Development Plan. This was approved in 2014. And you can see with that little red star, the location site has been established as an established urban area. And this is within the generalized land use concept within the MDP. And the second plan is the Southeast Airdrie Community Area Structure Plan, also known as the CASP. This was approved in 2018. And under this plan, the site was identified for future residential as well. So both policy documents are considered long-term planning frameworks, planning tools that the city uses, and the site has been identified under these for future residential. Thanks. And just the next layer of policy is the local planning policy. This is the Kings Heights Neighborhood Structure Plan. So this is more of a community scale planning document. And under this planning policy, the site was not included within the Kings Heights boundary. So as part of this application, this site will be included in the Kings Heights boundary. You can see that it is shadowed in just slightly in the upper northeast corner. And so the intention was to have this planned for development once it was no longer in use by Rocky View County. So this planning policy was approved in 2005. It provides intention for inclusion of this site at a later date. And this plan also, when it was approved, outlines kind of a scope for land uses across the whole community area. And this includes a mix of land uses in the residential form from single detached, which is the light yellow you see in the plan, all the way up to a higher density residential, which is the dark brown, closer to that commercial area. Thanks. Yeah, so now that we've completed sort of the higher order planning policies that inform where our application is right now. So right now in the stage of the planning and development process, we are looking at a land use redesignation for the site. So under those planning policies that I mentioned, a land use redesignation has to still be submitted to the city for review prior to any development activities occurring on a site. A land use redesignation will set forth the rules and the guidelines for future construction on a site. And these guidelines may include max allowable density that can be built on a site, unit maximums, height, setback restrictions, parking requirements, and the like. And so this land use application also must include technical studies. And these technical studies and reports are carried out by third-party qualified professionals. And these include studies that look at how the proposed new land use will or may impact transportation, existing transportation, the environment of the site, wildlife, soil, drainage. And these studies also have to include servicing studies that look at if the proposed land use can be supported by existing infrastructure, so water, sanitary, and stormwater management. So all of these reports and our proposed land use are reviewed by the city's internal departments, and the next step is a decision made by council with a public hearing. So the map we're looking at here, this shows Kings Heights neighborhood and the Ravenswood neighborhood, and you can see our site location just at the top in that orangey red color. So for our land use redesignation, our proposed land use is the R2T townhouse residential. You can see in the map this zoning district has been applied also to the east and the south of the site location. Currently, the site is zoned for urban holdings, and the urban holdings district, the intention for that is to allow for minimal uses until a later stage of development. And just to move through the development rules and guidelines that I had mentioned that are attached to a new zoning district or land use redesignation. So under the R2T, this land use redesignation can allow a maximum, this is a maximum, not what is going to be built, but a maximum of up to 62 units per hectare. Translated to acres, that's 25 units per acre. Parking is guided by the townhouse housing type, so that is a requirement of 2 stalls per unit. And it's anticipated for this development that all the parking will be provided on site. And under the R2T townhouse residential land use, it's also a building height maximum of up to 3 stories, and that translates to approximately 13 meters in height. Oh, yeah, that's the right one. Thanks, Jane. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions about the land use redesignation that we're proposing. Before I open it up to the Q&A period, this is kind of just a visual to help understand the fulsome process of development. Right now, you can see we're at the land use redesignation stage, and that's been guided by the 3 higher order policies that we spoke about. The next stages would be the development permit, which also must be reviewed by the city and requires even further detailed technical studies. And then after that's been reviewed, then we go into the building permit stage, which is closer to the construction phase. So right now, the land use redesignation application that we submitted was submitted in December 2025. Since then, it's undergone its initial review by the city departments. We're now at this stage of our engagement process, and we'll be looking to resubmit our application later this spring. Following this, should the city deem the application complete, then we would move into a public hearing date that would be scheduled by the city in the summertime. Thanks, Jane. So I know that was brief, but we can definitely utilize some of these slides to support questions that arise. We have this map here to facilitate any site-specific questions. So we have the area of the site there, along with the roadway names and the adjacent land uses that are implemented currently surrounding the site. So I'll just pass it over to Jane to facilitate any questions that have come in. And the project team will be here to answer those questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Tiffany. As a reminder, you're all welcome to continue submitting questions using that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you would prefer to speak, you can use the raise hand function and we'll call on you if time allows. We'll do our best to get through as many questions as possible this evening, but if we're not able to respond to everything, we will definitely follow up after the session. All right, so first question we've got from Sarah. She asked, how many visitor parking stalls will be provided to the units? If anyone could speak to that.
I'll start, and perhaps Ahmed would like to build upon it. But Michael Sydenham, transportation engineer with SEMA Plus. We aren't entirely sure of the exact number of visitor parking stalls that will be used on the project yet because the design is still underway. As shown in that previous slide, we're at the land use stage. That's a detail that will be determined at the development permit stage. That said, it will be compliant with the land use bylaw requirements for a project like this. If anybody else on the team would like to add to that, please feel free.
Hello, everyone. This is Ahmed Gouda from Tricor Design Group. As Michael said, it's still too early to define the final numbers. There is a conceptual layout which we were discussing with the city and just to ensure that the traffics and entrances and locations are accurate, but there is no final numbers at this stage. This will be part of the development permit application submission, which is still on the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your question. Next question asks, how long is the expected build time?
I think I can start answering that question, then I'll pass it over to Ahmed. That's again a very tough question I guess in terms of the planning process. We're still at the land use redesignation phase. And this could take another 6 months for approval of just the land use redesignation. And then, as I mentioned, the development permit will have to be submitted and reviewed by the city departments as well. And often those review times just depend on how busy the city is with volume of applications. complexities that might come up in terms of review of what's being proposed to be built. So all those steps have to happen before a shovel hits the ground on the site. And then I'll pass it over to Ahmed to speak to your experience with these kinds of development, sort of an approximate timeline.
Thank you, Tiffany. At this point, from when we get a building permit approval to start construction, we believe it will be no more than 24 months. But there is many factors plays into what is the final time is. But based on comparison with other projects and active clients and the same developers here, Sand Developments, they did hundreds of townhomes developments, and I believe that 1.5 years to 2 years should be a reasonable time to finish construction if there is no any obstruction to this process. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. Next question is asking, what will be the planned perimeter of the construction, and will it impact parking or travel around the lot during construction? If anyone is able to speak to that.
Again, this will be part of the logistics, but for sure, as per the policies and regulation of any city, we will not be allowed to use the public roads or block any of the parkings around us unless it's within the parameters of the development. Now there will be days that big trucks coming in for concrete, for example, or stuff like that. Yes, that temporarily there may be a blockage of road sometimes. That's for the heavy equipments coming in and out. But we are not anticipating to affect the parkings around the lot at this point.
Thank you, Ahmed. Someone else asks, this is another parking question, if we could provide a general range for our best guess for visitor parking, if anyone's able to speak to that.
I know.
Again, it's too early to define that. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like under each land use district, so if it moves forward with the R2T land use redesignation, there's specific bylaws that have to be adhered to. And that includes parking requirements, and that also includes the visitor parking stalls. But that would be the final numbers of that would be determined, yeah, as Ahmed was about to say, through the development permit review and process.
So thank you. Jumping towards technical studies now, someone asks, I know you said you were hiring a third-party group to do technical studies. How do we know this process has been transparent?
Yeah, I can jump on that. So the process for hiring the third party consultants, it's done through your regular like bidding proposal process. So we send out a scope of work to sub-consultants in the Calgary area or in the Airdrie area, and they send us back with a proposal and a budget, and that's approved by the clients, and we facilitate that agreement. So these are separate companies that the client hires on behalf of the project on a whole. So we are the planning consultants, but there may be an engineering firm or an environmental firm separate from us that conducts these studies. So those reports are handled and approved by that separate company, and by registered engineers, signed off and stamped by registered engineers. So we compile those reports on behalf of the application. Those are then sent to the city for review by their departments as well. So it goes through a couple stages, I guess, if you will, of approval eyes and lands at the city, and it is the city's role to determine the the accuracy of those reports through their review process as well before anything is finalized.
Thanks, Tiffany. Got our next question is a two-parter that touches on community capacity and the assumption that there was supposed to be a park on that site. So this person asked, I thought Kings Heights was maxed out with multifamily buildings. I was understanding this was to be a playground / park area. If anyone could touch on the site history, maybe?
Yeah, I can speak to that as well. So yeah, we've heard that kind of from our first mail outs and engagement with surrounding residents on the site. The perception that this may have been planned for a park. Through the higher order planning policy documents that I shared, at that stage of planning for the neighborhood before it was built out, parks are allocated to certain areas to support community amenities, but also drainage across the whole community area. So this site was not included as a potential park at that time. And we're not 100% sure. We did try to reach out and understand, where the perception of this site becoming a park maybe came from, because it's not in the planning documents that we've reviewed, nor has it come up as something that the city was planning in our discussions with the city in our pre-application meetings. So yeah, unfortunately, as per the planning policies, that is what we have to follow. They're statutory legal plans, and we have to follow the vision that has been set forth. And this site has been envisioned as part of a residential development to complete the Kings Heights neighborhood, and that was set forth in those higher order planning policy documents.
Thanks, Tiffany. We got a construction question coming in. They ask what the plans are to minimize disruption to existing community members during the construction period. They imagine there will be significant movement of large industrial equipment in and out of the area. If anyone could speak to that.
Well, as any construction site, there will be some movements of equipment to the build. We are going to plan with the builders and contractors to use the minimal impact. So we will try to see where we can control the entry and exit to the site. We will work on the logistics, storage areas, but probably we will use the Kingsland Heights gate side, because that's coming up from the Yankee Valley, and it will be the shortest route to go in and out the site. How it will be done and exactly, it's still too early at this stage to decide that. There is a lot of logistics, have to work with the builder and decide which will be the first phase of building, second phase of buildings, and so on. But I don't know exactly if this answers the questions, but the easiest answer I can find is we will see the shortest way between the Yankees and Kings Heights to go in and out to the site, so it doesn't go inside the residential area. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, I think so. And I can add to that, again, like when construction starts, construction operations will have to adhere to bylaws regarding nuisance, hours that they're able to work, so lighting. So there's a lot of rules of how construction can go on or operate, and anything that requires, maybe a temporary road closure that will have to be permitted, and yeah, so there will be guidelines and rules for construction at that time.
So thanks both. Next question. Someone asks if these units will be allowed to be rented out, or will they only be owner occupied?
Yeah.
At this stage, the client's plan is to sell. Sorry for jumping because it's related to the
All
design,
good.
but there is no confirmation on whether the buyers or the sand developments will keep some for rental or they will sell it all, and whoever will buy it might rent it for investments or they can move in and live on it. It's very difficult to predict what's going to happen.
Thank you. We've got a participant who has their hand raised. Heather, I'm gonna allow you to turn your mic on real quick to ask the team your question. Go ahead.
Hi, guys. So I can answer a couple of questions. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I can answer a couple of questions that have come up already. There was never a proposed park. We just wanted the idea to have a green space that the community could vote on. We actually spent about 2 years working with the asset manager from Rocky View. The reason why you don't see that as part of the planning for a park space for Airdrie is that it wasn't owned by the city of Airdrie. It was owned by Rocky View. So that land wasn't able to be planned by the city of Airdrie because it was owned as a storage site by Rocky View. So when we started the research on how we could potentially buy the property, we weren't even remotely, it wasn't brought up to us, despite our numerous attempts to stay engaged, that the lot was even available for sale. They just sold it, and then we got the notification that there was development going forward. So just so that everyone on the call, and whether this is recorded or not, has some perspective for the community, that is where the impression comes from people talking about the park space. Is it going to be a park space, etc.? We never committed to that, but we did indicate that we would have liked to have been considered for purchasing the lot to see if we could have it rezoned for community use space, is what we had only ever discussed. But as we know, that isn't the case. So I hope that answers a bunch of questions for everyone. I'm on the HOA board for Kings Heights, and so that's the perspective that I can provide from what we know or what I know about that lot. Also, there was another question you had mentioned. Someone had asked. It was the question prior to this one, and I don't recall what it was off the top of my head, but I'll have to review it and then I can provide the answer. But it was something that we knew going into it. So I'll comment in the Q&A if I think of it, but I just want to make sure that everyone is aware that there was never a plan for a park or a plan for anything. We tried to buy the lot so we could look at rezoning it, but that wasn't an option afforded to us. So that's all I'll mention. And I did ask a couple of direct questions about the parking. I know that you've addressed it already, but this is a really important topic to all of us, that especially because that is a multifamily, like already a dense area. When you submit planning, you have an idea of what the minimum visitor parking is. So further to my comments, I want to make sure that that site that you have proposed the diagram of, showing the visitor parking in the center, and the additional driveway / parking with the garage, that those things are going to be maintained in whatever final design that you have. Because what I think sometimes happens is that because you're not answering firmly on the parking, it's going to leave everyone with questions because you won't say, hey, this is the minimum parking. So if we can just get an idea of what the minimum parking is that's required for a development site, of the number of units that you're trying to put in there or you're proposing for that space, I think that would really help alleviate stress and people's concern from the neighborhood. If you can address that, that would be great. What the minimum parking is based on what you're proposing for the units.
Thanks, Heather.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know if there was a echo there. No, I really appreciate that context. That's really great to know. Because we had reached out to the HOA previously at our early stages of engagement, but for some reason that story about the perception of the park, the attempt to purchase it for a park, that wasn't relayed to us. So appreciate that, and we
No worries.
compile all the information that we get from these information sessions, from our engagement flyers, individual outreach, into a final summary report, and that's submitted to the city as well with our fulsome application package. So that will be forwarded on record and just recorded through our process on this application. So that's really good to know. And and for the visitor parking, I totally understand that concern comment has come forward even in our early stages again of outreach with as a key concern for the community members. So I will say that diagram of the site layout, the concept on I think it was the first flyer that was sent out. It really is a concept and subject to change based on the city's review of the application. It's a draft, it's a concept, it's meant to envision what could be built on the site. So by no means was that the final design. As
Of
Ahmed
course.
said, the development permit, the design is still in flux and will still be in flux through city reviews, even after this land use redesignation phase. So, but we still have our Engage Kings Heights website up, and we plan to continue updates on the application through that medium. And we also have individual contacts who have reached out to us requiring more information, and we're able to touch base with everyone as the application gets more detailed. And I can also follow up with you after the info session on the specific minimums for visitor parking under the R2T district. I just have to do some digging in the land use bylaw to get that number for you, but that's something we can more immediately follow up with right away.
That would be great. Am I still able to speak? I think I can answer one of the questions that came through if you can still hear me.
I just want to add something to Tiffany. As per the bylaw, we are required to provide 0.15 visitor parking from the number of the units, right?
Oh, okay.
Okay.
So 15%. So however we will design, we have to commit to this number, and we will be committing this number. How it will be designed and where it will be located and stuff, that will be again subject to the final design. But the minimum requirement as per the bylaw is 0.15 of the number of units we are proposing.
And is that typically what your minimum, like, do you meet the minimum, or do you ever?
This is the minimum.
Like, what is your, do you ever go above the minimum to lessen the impact of the parking issue that is undoubtedly going to be a problem there? So
it is debatable when we go beyond, because that takes out from the green area that the parks departments inside the city wants to have as a minimum green space or landscape space. So it is subjectable, and it have to be discussed with the departments of the city. Yes, we can provide more, but then the green landscape will be impacted. So the departments, so it's not just a white and black.
Right, I understand. Yeah. Also, just to mention the question about the rental, there's no way that the developer can control that. That's a City of Airdrie bylaw, and there isn't any way that we could ever impose what someone does with their property. So I know the rental situation is going to be a big topic also. There isn't any way that the developer or the HOA or even the city at this point could require the owners who buy that to not allow rentals. There just isn't anything in our bylaws that requires that. So I know that that's not going to make a lot of people happy, because there's people who rent out their basement or develop suites, and there's issues with parking. But I just want you to know this isn't a developer issue. They cannot control whether the owner rents out the property afterward. So just so everyone is aware, that's my knowledge from the city when we've asked about it before. So if you have an issue with that bylaw, I would suggest you read about it and then talk to your council members about it to have your voice heard, or what have you, what the next channels are for changing bylaws in the city. And then I'll hop off.
Thanks so much, Heather. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Heather. That was super helpful background and that was great. We've got a lot of questions coming in. I'm just trying to sift through. We've got a lot of big paragraphs, so if we could keep our questions a little bit brief and we can get to them a lot quicker. Thank you. Our next question is about construction logistics. They were asking, will these logistics be determined before we start building or afterwards? And does the city allow the developer to modify plans after construction begins?
No, the construction logistic and how it will be run have nothing to do with the design. It's related to the operation. And as Tiffany mentioned earlier, there is a bylaws and policies on how you do construction, and the builders have to comply with these rules and policies. They just cannot go and do whatever they like, however they like. There is rules to follow. Thank you.
Thanks, Ahmed. Next question is about land remediation. They're asking if there are any concerns about land remediation had to be carried out due to contamination quite recently in the community. Are there any concerns about this during the construction process? And what about remnants leaching into the future units? If anyone could speak to that.
Yeah, I can start. I don't know if we have, I think we might have someone from the environmental organization on here, but I can start speaking to that. Yeah, so as you know, the site history, it was used as a storage yard for highway maintenance equipment. So as part of the overall remediation and planning process, there's been site, they're called phase 1 environmental site assessments, as well as a biophysical overview. Those two reports have been carried out on the site, particularly the phase 1 ESA has also been conducted numerous times along with the phase 2 ESA. So there's a history of environmental studies that have been taken stock of the site since I think they date back to 2017. So we've acquired these as part of our application. And again, those are submitted to the city with the final remediation certificate. So the remediation report and remediation certificate, to the best of my understanding, I'm not an environmental engineer by any means, but to my understanding, these reports show that the soil has been remediated to a level that is safe for redevelopment. I don't know the exact process, but I do believe that the soil is taken out and tested and retested in order to see what the salt levels are until it is deemed safe for development. I hope that answered the question. If someone from the environmental company is on, please feel free to chime in.
That's great. Thanks, Tiffany. Sorry, got a lot coming in. It's moving. Okay, this next question asks, if the concept changes after city review, are we required to re-engage with the community directly?
For the land use redesignation application, yes, if we at this stage we're pursuing the R2T land use district, there's no anticipation that's to change. But if it were to change, if we were to propose a different district, we would have to adjust our studies accordingly, go through another review process and do additional engagement with the community. We're not at the development permit stage yet, but if there was a significant change, I don't think if there was one parking stall added or taken away, that would evoke a fulsome engagement session such as this. But if there was something significant that the city did request that we do further engagement, that would definitely be flagged, and we would engage with the residents on those changes. Oh, you're still muted, Jane. Sorry
Sorry.
about that.
Hi. I just wanted to let everyone know that the Q&A feature in this session, if we could just keep it to only questions. We have a feedback form that we'll share post-session where everyone could share all their feedback, as well as my email where people could share more of their opinions. We would just like to keep this Q&A more around questions that we'll be able to answer over general comments, if that's all right. All right. Tiffany, I may need your help with this Q&A window. It's just flooding in.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I can just I'll roll through some of these because hopefully some of these we've answered in terms of if everything goes through, what's the completion time anticipated? Again, that's, I think Ahmed had mentioned, construction could be 24 months. We'd be looking to 6 months for this application, and that doesn't include the development permit and building permit reviews. So it is like, it's really an estimation of time because it depends how busy the city is with other applications, and the capacity that the city has and complexity of an application. So it's really hard to say 3 to 5 years. I'm roughly jumping off in terms of all of the approvals that are required, and construction's complete and the units are up for sale. I know that's a wide range, but hopefully that gives a little bit of an estimation on fulsome completion time.
I think also, just as we skim through the questions, we really should be focusing on the ones that are applicable to the application we're talking about, which is the land use redesignation. The detailed questions about the specific units and the number of bedrooms and the height, those are very much more applicable to the development permit, which follows this application and is not part of the application that we're actually dealing with tonight, which is the rezoning to R2T.
Thanks, Pam.
There is a lot of questions about the development permit, but I'm just looking through these. I can answer. So this one's from Julie. It mentions how there's multifamily units on 2 sides of the site, and she's wondering about the infrastructure from water and traffic. How will existing infrastructure be able to support the proposed development? So that the answer to that is that ties into those technical studies that I was speaking to before. It's required as part of the application that third-party reports are carried out in terms of how our proposed land use, with consideration of if it was to be built out to the max units. We don't know that, but the capacity for the infrastructure is analyzed based on that, those max units, to ensure that there would be enough capacity for the proposed development. So those reports look at the existing water systems, sanitary systems, and stormwater drainage, and to see if there would be capacity to support this. So the reports that we've conducted, they are still in review with the city, but at this time, we haven't had any red flags in terms of this this proposed development being unable to be supported by the current infrastructure. I know there was a recent lift station that received upgrades for sanitary capacity, and that is the one that's tied into this community. And traffic, maybe Michael, if you can speak to kind of the transportation impact assessment and how that's conducted for a land use redesignation application.
Yeah, so we worked with the city of Airdrie to determine an applicable scope of work for the study. Airdrie recently updated their transportation master plan, which included future model forecasts for projected traffic at various population horizons. And with that, a capital improvements program. It's been confirmed a traffic signal will be installed at the intersection of Yankee Valley Boulevard and Kings Heights Gate this year. And with the analysis, we basically take what the projected traffic is if this unit or if this development wasn't constructed, determine what the infrastructure capacity is. We layer on the proposed potential development units. Even though it's not been finalized, we assumed, like Tiffany mentioned, the maximum number, 60 units on here. And we distribute the traffic following existing traffic patterns, and we see if there's any congestion issues. But our report showed actually, especially with the installation of that new traffic signal, this immediate area, there's no traffic congestion or concerns for the area. We don't anticipate any challenges with the proposed development.
Michael. Next question coming in. Someone's asking about infrastructure in the community, whether infrastructure capacity is reviewed as part of the application. Can existing infrastructure support this development? If anyone could speak to this.
Yeah, I would just reiterate the technical studies that I spoke to before. The ones that are carried out are for servicing, that includes water and sanitary capacity, as well as stormwater management and transportation. So those are the infrastructure reports that are conducted to ensure there would be capacity before any development activities occur. And I guess another piece of infrastructure, I'm just looking at the questions here. Someone's mentioned concern about the impact on pedestrian safety. As part of the process for the land use redesignation, again, there are guidelines in terms of pedestrian requirements, sidewalk requirements that are listed under the R2T land use district. So those would be implemented through the district rezoning, but then also down the line in the development permit and design of this site layout.
I would also just add to that that when a neighborhood structure plan is developed, for instance, in this situation, these lands were identified as residential. So there are some built-in assumptions when infrastructure is going in that residential will be put on this site. Therefore, it works into population planning for school sites. It works into servicing requirements. And those types of things. It also into the traffic network and what size of roads need to be in place to accommodate this, because it was anticipated to be a residential development. So it was built into that.
Thanks, Pam.
This next question, someone's asking about the projected time frame. I'm sure you've already touched on this, Tiffany, but in case someone else or some people are coming in a little later, when would the design be finalized to give, solid information as to number of units, parking stalls, etc.?
So design finalization, that'd be part of the development permit application process. So typically that happens after the land use redesignation application. And that design process, again, there's no hard timeline on it. It really depends on alignment with between the developer and the city's review. And that review process can happen quite a few times before a development permit and the associated design is approved. And we can move to the building permit and construction phase. Yeah, so I'm sorry, there's no concrete timeline for that, but it really does depend on the back and forth between the city and the designer.
There, just trying to get my video going as well. So, hey everyone, Jordan Furness. I'm the team lead of policy planning, but which is essentially long range planning. And so I just wanted to jump in quickly with hopefully a couple of answers as well. There was a question about the studies. Yes, so we do require professionally stamped and approved studies. We also offer citizens a chance to come in and look at the studies when it gets to that, when it's at that stage. There are copyright issues where we can't just share it by email, that type of thing, because this is professional work. But if you got permission of the professional doing the work, they might be willing to share copies. But at the very least, city administration is happy to sit with you with a physical copy so you can see who did it and what their conclusions are on the study. Michael Sydenham did mention the traffic lights going in, so that is a big change in terms of how traffic will happen at Yankee Valley Boulevard and Kings Heights Gate in the future. So yeah, we're waiting to hear the results of that review from the technical study and what our engineers think of that one. And from Heather's comments earlier, she is absolutely correct. We can't control rentals or ownership, but that's not even an Airdrie choice. That's actually across Canada. In terms of human rights, I don't know the exact quotation of it, but we can control the use of the site, so how it's built, the buildings that are on it, but we can't control ownership or rental, and that's the same for any city across Canada in that, unless you go into some real specific condo agreements. And then finally, we do have typically, just to clarify on the visitor parking count, we actually have a requirement for multi-residential of 0.25 stalls per building. And so I think 0.15 was mentioned earlier, so it'd only be a couple stall difference in that. But that's certainly something that, yeah, we'd be looking for just sort of comparables on that, and then also be able to support that to determine an appropriate amount. One of the advantages of this site is that, yeah, on the three sides, not anticipated with this type of district that's being proposed to all have front driveways. It would be some shared entrances. And so what that does is retain parking, on-street parking that is currently there right now. So yeah, I just wanted to hit a little bit of that. And then in terms of time frame, yeah, we're just looking at the land use application. There's a separate process for the development permit. And as mentioned earlier by Tiffany, we're anticipating it's probably a September type public hearing, but that's when the city will be sending out notifications of a date of once we've determined that we feel comfortable enough to make a recommendation based on the public feedback and the technical feedback. Then we will have a date, and we will also let the community know when that date will be. And that's a chance to speak directly to council about why you support or don't support or want to see changes to that land use application. Thanks for the opportunity to respond.
Thanks, Jordan. That does help answer some questions. Appreciate that. I do see we're 2 minutes to time. If there are more questions, I'm just having to scan through some of them. We can take another 5-10 minutes, but definitely if people need to hop off, we will be following up. We do have the website available. And Jane will give us more information after we've answered a couple more questions as to kind of what the next steps are and how you can stay updated as we move forward with the resubmission of this application. So I noticed this is a bigger question as well, but Sandra's asking about the impact on schools, which hasn't been addressed. Further to what Pam had mentioned, when this community area was planned through the higher order policies, the residential units and projected populations, those those numbers are considered in the allocation of required school sites. So that's something that is part of a long-term planning process. So in terms of the impact on currently built schools, that would be something that would be integrated into future plans. It's also, school sites are also a process that the provincial bodies have to be part of the decision making. So it is quite out of scope for a land use redesignation, but it is considered really early on in the planning process through the city when those community plans are created. I'm just looking through some more of the questions here. Someone has mentioned the 13 meters. So that is typically a 3-story building, but I just wanted to reiterate again that 13 meters, that's a maximum. So it doesn't mean what will be built on the site down the line is going to be exactly 13 meters. It could be less than that, but the R2T district indicates that 13 meters as a maximum. I think maybe Jane or Pam, if there's questions I've missed that that we could answer, let me know. Otherwise, I wonder if we wrap up for the evening and if Jane, you can provide information as to kind of next steps.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the remaining Q&As here seem to be majority development permit related or just general comments. We will take these comments into account also, but I do encourage everyone to submit their feedback within our feedback form, which I'm going to share in the chat here. Hopefully this link, yeah, it's clickable and everyone can see it. That'll be in the webinar chat instead of the Q&A. Thank you to everyone for taking the time to join us today. And sharing your questions. Your feedback is a huge part of the process and will be documented and included in an engagement summary provided to the city as part of their review of the application. So with that, we encourage you to fill out the feedback form. The link is in the chat, but you'll also receive an additional email with the feedback form link. Tomorrow, I think Zoom will provide that, and I'll send a more fulsome version in the next coming days, which includes the session recording and the presentation slides. So you'll all be able to re-review, or those who weren't able to attend today could review the presentation. If you have any additional questions after this session, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll also share my email in the chat, but you'll see that on the screen. Here. Information about the project, including materials and session recording, like I said, will be shared following the session. We thank you all for your time and participation and your interest in the project. Hope you all have a great evening. I'm just going to leave this window open for a while, but the rest of the team can start hopping off. Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Mm-hmm.
Take care.
Thank you for your question. Have a good
Thanks,
evening.
everyone.
Thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.